Welcome to another edition of Disability and You. I am Ganesh Singh, and on this edition, my discussion will focus on the elimination of violence against women. We are in the 16 days of activism, which commenced on November 25th and will conclude on World Human Rights Day on December 10th. Joining me in studio is Omati Madri and Renata Chakasang. Both are members of the Civil Society National Reference Group, which is part of the Spotlight Initiative. On this edition, we'll discuss what services are available for survivors of gender-based violence, who should get involved, and what the 16 days of activism is all about. So without further ado, I'll go to Omati. And Omati, if you can, well, first of all, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ganesh. It's indeed a pleasure to be here with you today and to create a little bit more awareness around the prevention of violence against women and girls.
Excellent. So could you elaborate a bit more on what the 16 days of activism is all about? You know, it's somewhat of a buzz phrase right now, social media, and even in the traditional media, you're hearing a lot about the 16 days. So just tell us what it's all about.
So the 16 Days of Activism is a global campaign. It's been around since around 1991, and it sort of was supported in 2008 by the UN Secretary General. At that point, creating more of an emphasis for a global campaign around Unite by 2030 to end violence against women and girls. It's global. It is observed in and across the world to create more awareness on the gender-based violence that is perpetrated against women and girls. We know that in every society, and we want to focus a little bit more on us here in Guyana. We need a lot more information around gender-based violence, how to report, what exactly is gender-based violence, and who should report, who you should report to. We need a change in attitude and around gender-based violence. We sometimes seems to be more accepting of violence that is being perpetrated against women and girls. And so in this period, we do what we call Orange the World. As you will notice in and around our society, we will have lots of orange flags, and we'll be wearing a lot of orange, and we certainly want to send a stronger message using the color code speaks to the fact that we should be focusing on how we can prevent and stop violence against women and girls.
So who should really get involved in the 16 days of activism? Probably Renata, you can
I think that's a very good question. Everyone should be involved. Disproportionately, women die at the hands of their loved ones. And this has become such, I don't want to use the pandemic, but it's approaching that across the world, that more and more women and girls are suffering at the hands, are dying as a result of interpersonal violence. In Guyana, we want to refer to it as family violence, but it's, it is between persons, and somehow women seem to be coming out with the shorter end of the stick. They're dying. And so this campaign really is to draw attention to it, and therefore, by putting a spotlight, no pun intended, on this issue, we're hoping that everybody gets involved, because at some point or the other, the data is showing that 1 in 2 persons in Guyana experience violence.
But, one of the things, and you mentioned everyone should get involved, and we need that. We need a collective effort to tackle this scourge that is plaguing our society. But we have a culture in Guyana where persons will say, that's a family issue, that's a husband and wife issue, that's a girlfriend-boyfriend issue, let's not get involved. How can we help to change that culture?
Well, I think we first need to create more awareness around the fact that gender-based violence, violence against women and girls, is a human rights violation. It's removing their right to grow, to develop, to exist in an environment, in their own homes, in their own communities, in their own schools without violence, and so they're living in fear. And so that's the first thing we need to, when we talk about the prevention of violence against women and girls, we're talking about a global or a human rights violation globally. The other thing that we're talking about, as Renata just mentioned, 1 in 2 women are experiencing violence. When we look at some of the global stats, it tells us that every 11 minutes a woman die globally as a result of gender-based violence. So it is it is a critical concern.
It is. And those statistics you're mentioning, those are the reported ones.
Yes.
Correct.
What about the unreported cases?
Yeah.
Even with
right.
that, those statistics are frightening.
It is.
I think, as Omati mentioned, it is a human rights violation. Everyone deserves to live a life free of violence.
Yes.
And the data is showing that women are disproportionately affected by violence. And the reason I said that everyone should be involved, the time has come for men to step up, to hold other men accountable for their behavior. I think there are interventions that men can take with other men to prevent this from happening. We need to make earlier interventions. We tend to be wringing our hands whenever we hear of someone dying, but we need to probably step in at the first argument. We need to probably step in before the first argument occurs. So that we're helping. We're helping each other. We need to be more mindful. We need to really be our neighbors' keepers in this instance. We have one, the president is pushing one Guyana. And really and truly, to be one Guyana, we need to be very mindful of each other.
We need to get back to that community spirit we had some decades ago.
Yeah, definitely. As you were asking who should be concerned and why should we be concerned, and when a woman die as a result of gender-based violence, her children are left. Sometimes the husband gets sent to prison, and we've seen in many cases the men are committing suicide after they would have murdered their girlfriend, their wives. So it creates lots of chaos for the family, and children are abandoned, and some children will have to go into foster care or orphanage care, and will have to grow up without their parents. Some children are witnessing this level of violence and therefore are more likely to perpetrate violence, not just when they become adults, but even as children. That level of violence that they're exposed to will drive rage, will drive anger, will create a sense of loss and abandonment. So everyone need to be concerned about stopping violence against women and girls.
Once those those acts are committed, it has a rippling effect, as you mentioned there. But we know that there are many instances of GBV. We know there are many persons who suffer on a daily basis. What services are available? Because there are people out there, and I can honestly tell you, working within the CSO movement at the grassroots level, people are not aware. What are some of the services available? Probably, Renata, you can.
Okay, so first off, we have the Domestic Violence Act. That has been in place since 1996. And basically,
But is it relevant now, or should it be amended?
No, it's very relevant now. I don't think it was a very good act. We're tweaking it some to make some more services available to people, but the heart of it is a very good act. And it basically says that when you commit violence against a family member or somebody you have a personal relationship with, you're committing a crime against the state. And it strongly says that. And under that act, you are entitled to some services, one of which is a protection order, which allows the person who is the survivor of the violence to request that the person who's perpetrating the violence be held at bay. So at least 100 feet, and it's given on demand at the magistrate's court. I think it's at the magistrate's court. So
Yeah.
you can certainly report it to any police station. There's a lot of work being done with police officers with respect to gender-based violence, so that they know the protocol, they know the referral pathways, they know how to get you help. As my friend from the DPP's office says, the police are your best friend in an instance where you're suffering from domestic violence or any form of violence, really. The second thing is, under this act is something called an Occupation Order Act, which allows the police to remove the perpetrator from the home, so that you are not, as a woman, fleeing with your children, or being displaced, rather, from with your children. Oftentimes you find that women are taking their children and leaving the home,
Yeah.
and the perpetrator remains at home, free to enjoy his usual lifestyle. So the Occupation Act says that women and children will remain, and the perpetrator, in most cases, happens to be male, has to vacate the premises. And if it's a rental property, then that person also has to maintain the rental payments on that property.
Quite interesting, and I'm sure a lot of persons out there are not aware of what the contents of the act,
Right.
those contents
And there are a
are.
lot of other services, but those are the main basic services.
Is there anything you want to add to the available services, Omati?
Well, recently, the 914 number was launched by the Ministry of Human Services, which allows women and girls all across the country to call that number, and help is available.
That's 24 hours.
Yeah, it's 24 hours immediately, and we've had some good contact with 914, and it's become quite efficient in reporting when you call the 914 number. Of course, you can walk into any social services agency and seek help. Renata mentioned support from the police, and we know more and more police are being trained. This year's Spotlight, I believe, trained over 2,000 police officers to be more supportive and to receiving
And
reports,
sensitive to the
and are
situation.
sensitive to receiving these reports. So, and then there's a number of grassroots organizations in many of the different regions that survivors can talk to and reach out for help.
And that help includes counseling. The other thing that the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security does is provide shelter
Yes.
for women and children.
But quickly before we pause for a break, I just want to zero in on, you mentioned shelters. Are those shelters, let's say they're accommodating to persons with disabilities? Are you aware of that?
I'll
If they
be
would
honest,
have
I'm not aware, but I do believe in some cases there
measures would be put in place.
measures will be put in place. And I'm glad that you brought up persons with disability. Oftentimes we don't focus enough attention on persons with disabilities. They live full lives, and part of living full lives is being vulnerable to violence.
Yeah, because many women with disabilities are on the receiving end of GBV, and they are afraid to report because they are in impoverished circumstance, depending on these perpetrators for survival, and choices are limited. And we all know GBV can lead to a disability.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes.
We've seen many cases like that.
We've seen many cases, women who without an arm. Even locally, we've seen cases with women who are so badly injured and badly hurt because of violence in their families, or perpetrated against them.
Yeah.
One
What
of
is this,
the-
Dr.
One of the other options is that the ministry has what is known as a difficult circumstances fund. So that is also another avenue where some assistance can be given. We're looking at assistance or support from a cumulative standpoint. So there's a shelter, there's the legislation, then there's also the special circumstance, the difficult circumstances thing. The other thing that the ministry has been doing, in which they must be congratulated for, is that they're providing under the WIN program, it is a Women's Empowerment Program, which allows persons to be able to get trained, to develop skills so that they can take care of themselves. They can get a job or create a livelihood opportunity for themselves. Oftentimes women will remain in
Harmful
in,
situation.
in an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship because they don't have the wherewithal to be self-supporting. And so the ministry is taking on this to their
And
credit.
based on studies and research and so on, that's one of the main factors why
Yeah.
women stay the economics of it.
Yep. Yeah.
Renata Omatibel, pause for a break. We'll be back after this.
Severe driving conditions such as heavy traffic, harsh weather conditions, and exceeding oil change intervals can cause sludge, which blocks your engine's vital oilways. If untreated, it can rob an engine of power and ultimately its life. It's time to switch to Castrol GTX. Castrol GTX double action formula cleans away old sludge and protects against new sludge formation better than tough industry standards. It is proven to provide 25% superior engine protection. Help extend the life of your engine by using Castrol GTX. Castrol, it's more than just oil, it's liquid engineering.
Welcome back. This is Disability and You, and my focus is on elimination of violence against women. I have with me in studio Omati Madri and Renata Chakasang. Both are from the civil society movement, and they are members of the Civil Society National Reference Group of the Spotlight Initiative. Earlier, before we paused for that break, we would have discussed the prevalence of gender-based violence, why persons should get involved or be concerned with this plague that we have in our society. But Omati or Renata, either one of you can take this. Why do you think we have such an increase of GBV cases in Ghana? It's like almost every day you're greeted with something in the newspaper or on social media, or in the traditional media of somebody suffering in the hands of a partner. Why do you think we have this?
What we have is an increase in report, or in reports, I should say. We can't necessarily say at this point in time that we do have an increase in violence against women, because I don't know that we have that scientific information as yet. But
what about the deaths? It's like it seems like there's almost an increase in the number of people that are losing their lives.
Well, it's also because that information is easily shared now, but 10 years ago, we would not have known so easily what's happening in Essequibo or in Berbice or even just outside of Georgetown. So because everything is so quick to share, we're becoming much more aware of what's happening. So again, we would want to say that there's an increase in report, and that's mainly because there's so much more opportunities and avenues where you can actually report gender-based violence. I think what we are recognizing is that more women are seeking out help. More girls are reporting sexual violence. There has been a significant increase in the reported cases of sexual violence against children. Girls are reporting, boys are reporting. We've seen a significant increase in boys reporting sexual violence. So the opportunity to report, or the awareness around reporting has led to more persons reporting, and there are more services available as well. And this is why we're seeing that level of persons coming forward to the police and to the social services and calling in through the hotlines and really seeking out help as we have been asking them to.
So you say persons are more empowered now?
They are more empowered, and I think a lot more people are receiving help, and they're spreading that message. They're talking to others. We're seeing more cases, particularly sexual abuse cases. We're seeing more successful prosecution through the courts, and this is encouraging families not to take an approach where they're settling matters, but actually to take it through the legal system, because this is very harmful to the children.
So at least that is something, at least there's a positive
Yes.
in this whole situation, that people are more aware of what measures can be taken
Yep.
in the legal.
I think, as you alluded to earlier, that when you ask the question, why should anybody be involved? Because people would tend to think that if it's violence in the family, then let the family resolve it.
Yeah.
That's been the pattern.
Right. So with the passing of the Domestic Violence Act, it basically said that violence within a family is no longer just a family matter, but a community matter. So you have more people who are willing to report, and it doesn't have to be a family member who's reporting, but it could be a neighbor, somebody who's observed it. If people turn up to their workplaces with visible injuries, or they relate a story, then a co-worker or a boss or whoever can report it, the matter, and then there's a process that kicks in from...
But if you can elaborate on that process of reporting.
Well, a report must be made to a police officer that an incident has happened before the process can be triggered. Unless a report is made, then the law does not kick in.
So if someone calls the 914, they'll be guided.
They certainly will.
Yes.
They should be guided, and they will be... What we have now is an increase in advocates. And so they would provide you, if you're not comfortable going by yourself, with somebody to accompany you through the process. So, because sometimes it can be a daunting process.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially if you've not interacted with the judicial or the court system.
And particularly if you're a child as well,
that's
the reporting process for children has really created much more of a child-friendly setting through the child advocacy centers. We've seen many international partners like the European delegation and UNICEF and supported by Human Services Ministry, setting up of child advocacy centers across all of the regions. There is a child advocacy center where a child can walk in, or their parents can walk in with the child and report an abuse case, and the child will tell that story once, so they will not necessarily have to go to the police and to the doctor and to the CPA officer or any other place to report that matter. And when that matter goes to court, the child is supported. There's an advocate for that child in the court system. So these are some of the support services.
And what definition do they use for a child, for the child advocate centers?
Any child under
18?
the age of 18, 18 and under.
You mentioned children and children go in and make reports, but also the change can start with young people.
Yes.
Or start with children.
Yep.
If a young man or a young woman, they want to get involved, what can they do to help in this process of sensitization or to change what we're currently witnessing as it relates to GBV?
We have seen many young persons, young men, young women who are taking up their roles as advocates. They are getting together and talking among themselves, talking to each other. They're utilizing materials that we have shared with them, simple messages, brochures. They are... a few weeks ago, I went to cricket up in Kanji, and some of the young boys were, before the match started, they had a time where they talk about violence against children, and in particular gender-based violence, sexual violence. So we see young men and women, teenagers within the school setting, within the community, in sports, taking up a role to talk to their colleagues, talk to their peers about what is gender-based violence, what is sexual violence, how you can report it. And these are some of the roles that our young people can take up. Start in your own homes, in your own communities.
Is it something led by the Ministry of Education, or is it by NGOs, or it's just the young persons doing it on their own?
I believe the Ministry of Human Services have a young influencers group, but a number of initiatives like this that we are seeing at the community level is being led by grassroots organizations, civil society like ourselves, and a number of other agencies are taking up the role to bring in young people to be advocates.
So it's a
let me relate a story. So last year, the Rotaract Club of the University of Guyana decided, because they're holding their meetings online, and they decided to have some parenting sessions for young people at UG. And so they thought that maybe just a few people would be interested. And they were blown away by the level of interest demonstrated in this parenting class. And it was very enlightening to see that this level of interest was there. So much so that they're running the program again this year.
Yeah.
And Child Link has been the facilitator, I think,
Yes.
of this program. And
Yeah.
this was a program really driven by young people. So seeing what's happening in their society, they know that younger persons are becoming parents,
Yep.
and younger persons are considering how it is that they can improve their things in their generation. They're taking a different tact. They're being more proactive, and that is heartening to see.
Definitely it is.
Yes.
But what about playing a more active role in the home? We talk about young people being advocates, helping to sensitize their peers and so forth. What about them witnessing acts of violence within the home? Is this system set up in such a way that they can go out and make a report or seek help
Definitely.
on behalf of a relative?
Definitely. They can make a report, and then the police are supposed to take it forward.
Yes, any person can make a report. A child can call in and make a report. A child can walk into any of the centers. They can walk into the police station. They can report in school.
They can call 914.
Yep, they can call the hotline number and make a report.
Even if it's a mother or father situation or
Yes.
Yes.
an aunt, uncle.
Yes,
Okay.
they can call in.
It's everybody's business, and so systems are put in place to accept reports from anybody. There will be, of course, be an accompanying investigation. It is interesting to note that in years past, murder was the #1 crime in Guyana. It has now been replaced by sexual assault
Sexual
Sexual
assault.
assault.
Yes. Yep.
and violence. So it really means, and it's critical that people be aware of it, and that people recognize and think about what they can do to reduce the incidence of violence in our community. Guyana has become an increasingly violent society, and we must, as a people, take some action.
We need to.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are underlying factors that, are the cause for
Causes
what
to
you just said there. But that's for another another program. But let's talk a bit before we wrap up, Omati and Renata, about the civil society reference group that you guys are part of and the Spotlight Initiative. If you probably can just share a bit on what that is all about. But we know the Spotlight you mentioned, it's a
Yeah.
global
Program.
and so on. But what's the role of the civil society reference group as it relates to the bigger Spotlight program?
Right. So Spotlight program globally had their first learning symposium about 2 months ago, and one of the critical learning from that program is that every day Spotlight is saving the lives of 2 women. So across the globe, the public education, there's a focus on legislation and policy. There's 6 pillars. There's a focus on the movement, the women's movement. There's a program on services, on data and how we utilize that data, and then there's a focus on advocacy and intervention at the community level. So it's a very comprehensive program. It's working in Guyana in the regions where there have been more reports on GBV. What we've seen coming out of the Spotlight program here is a more collaboration among civil society, among the UN agencies, as well as with the Ministry of Human Services. In the longer term, I think what is going to be some of the successes is that there's going to be an increased level of awareness, and there is currently an increased level of awareness, but I think there's going to be more action that is taken, not just from families and survivors, but service providers will become more knowledgeable, have more skills, be better able to respond. So there's a lot of capacity strengthening across agencies that are frontline service providers. We talked about police being trained. We hearing a lot more about counselors being trained. We're hearing a lot more about services being set up. The child advocacy centers being set up in far to reach community. We visited a program in the hinterland in Region 1. So we know that communities that are sort of hidden away are now becoming more aware and are getting more support. And so we think that there's going to be a stronger movement on the prevention
Moving
of
forward.
violence against women and girls as a result of Spotlight.
Excellent. Anything to add to that, Renata?
For those who don't know, because we tend to assume things, the Spotlight Initiative for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls is a program funded by the European Union, implemented by the United Nations. Guyana has been a lucky recipient of it because of our numbers, and it's the Civil Society National Reference Group is a part of the mechanism for the implementation of the Spotlight Initiative, because so much of the work is done by civil society.
Oh, definitely.
And so they have a role to play with respect to ensuring that the program is going according to plan and that we are having the impact.
Because for many
necessary.
decades, it was civil society leading this
correct.
issue.
Yep, we have a critical role in sustaining some of these grassroots
Definitely.
initiatives as well. Yeah.
All right. Omati, Renati, are there anything final that you guys want to say?
I think in coming back to reporting, I would like to say that when you call the 914 number, it's anonymous. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to say anything about who you are. You can call and make a report, and nobody will ask you any questions. Please report any case of violence that you notice.
Excellent. Renata?
And for me, I would like more men to step up to the plate to demonstrate positive masculinity. There is a way to be a man that doesn't involve violence, particularly against people you profess to
And that
love.
needs to be normalized.
That needs
Yes.
to definitely be normalized.
Yep.
I want to thank you both for sharing with the public, and all the best in the work that you continue to do on a daily basis as it relates to gender-based violence. Thank you very much, and do join me next time for another edition of Disability and You.